Hi, everyone. I'm Vladimir Jutit. We are watching all the news happening around the United States and all around the world. If you see these monitors behind me, you know that these are feeds coming into all of our stations, all of our affiliates across the country. If there is news breaking anywhere in these United States, we're going to bring it to you live right here on CBS News 24/7. Here are the top stories we're following for you this morning. A major jobs report shows that the United States made strong job gains in the month of September, what it says about the state of the labor market and the potential of more interest rate cuts. Rising tensions continue in the Middle East as Israeli bombings cause huge explosions just outside of Beirut's airport. We'll bring you the latest reporting on the ground in Israel. And on the campaign trail, former President Donald Trump repeats lies about the 2020 election during a rally in Michigan, while Republican Liz Cheney stumps with Vice President Kamala Harris in Wisconsin. This is CBS News 24/7. The second to last jobs report before Election Day was just released. The stronger than expected numbers could signal more federal interest rate cuts. Look at the stock market. Doing really well this morning. The United States added more than 250,000 jobs last month and outperforming August job numbers and unemployment, which took a slight dip. Here to break down those numbers is CBS News contributor Javier David. Unless you've become a CBS News correspondent, Javier, are you now a correspondent?
No,
I'm sitting
in the
that's what
big
it says in the
chair,
teleprompter.
so.
I knew you're a CBS News contributor, and your bosses are probably like, wait, what? He works with us. Javier, my brother, break down this report for us.
Well, I come bearing good news for once. This is thankfully not a recessionary jobs market. It's not even close. It caps off a run of really strong, surprisingly bullish data that we got this week. The numbers were better than expected, up 254,000 jobs for the month. That compares to a upwardly revised number for August and July. The unemployment rate fell. Lots of activity or strength in job creation in the restaurant and bar industry. Average hourly earnings are up. It's all, across the board, a very good news story. So if you're an incumbent party seeking to hold the White House, Kamala Harris, this is a very good number.
Yeah. In fact, as you know, part of what former President Donald Trump and Senator J.D. Vance have been saying about why they deserve a second chance, or at least Trump deserves a second chance in the White House, is because what they say is a weak economy under Joe Biden and Vice President Harris. But this number in this report, and we've seen reports like this over the course of the last couple of months, Javier, which do signal to the fact that the United States the economy is stronger than it has been in a number of years. And as you point out, this is the first report since the Fed cut the benchmark interest rate last month. So what does that mean for November and December rate decisions?
So look, the economy is clearly on solid ground, and the consumers still feel the vibes or the negative vibes of higher prices that are decisively higher than they were pre-pandemic and certainly the highest they've been in decades. But what this means for the Fed is it probably takes a 50 basis point rate cut off the table for next month. I think markets were kind of aggressively pricing in another aggressive price cut. The Fed really surprised us last month with the 50 basis point they needed out. There were expectations that we were going to get another 50 by the end of the year, but it probably means 25 basis points. The Fed is trying to execute this sort of pivot away from being singularly focused on inflation to trying to prevent massive widespread job losses, which, again, as these numbers show, are clearly not happening. But at the end of the day, the Fed they want to soften rates. They want to move lower on rates, but they don't want to overdo it. And they do want to make sure that they don't take the eye off the inflationary ball.
Yeah, and that the inflationary ball is an important one because, as you say, for a lot of Americans, these numbers sound great on paper, but when you head to the grocery store or you go to the gas pump, you're still feeling that pinch of prices that being higher than they were a few years ago. Javier David, thank you, my brother. Have a nice weekend.
Thank you.
All right. Let's get into some international news now. Iran's supreme leader this morning vowed that Iran and its allies will not back down from Israel as he presided over Friday prayers for the first time in years. This as Israel carried out a wave of airstrikes across Lebanon overnight with explosions rocking Beirut's southern suburb, including one close to the international airport. For more on this, I want to bring in CBS News senior foreign correspondent Elizabeth Palmer, who's joining me now to discuss. Liz, what was the target of these airstrikes?
Hey, Vlad. Well, the Israeli military hasn't commented yet, but Israeli media say it was a Hezbollah intelligence headquarters. And the human target was the man who was about to assume the leadership of Hezbollah to replace Hassan Nasrallah, who was so dramatically killed in another airstrike last week. Airstrikes in general over the past days show a pattern. They are part of a campaign to eliminate Hezbollah's leadership. It all began about 2 weeks ago with those exploding pagers and the walkie-talkies. That killed several senior commanders. And since then, several more have been dying in airstrikes. The Israeli military announced yesterday, for example, they'd killed Hezbollah's head of communications, a man called Mohammed Rashid Skafi.
So are Israeli ground forces planning or already moving deeper into Lebanon today? Liz, what are you hearing?
Haven't heard of any big troop movements. There have been skirmishes on the Lebanese side along the border, and Hezbollah has fired rockets, so it does appear that they have some left. The clue may be the Israeli military ordering about 24 hours ago residents of 20 towns to leave their homes, and that includes the regional center. It's a big town, Nabatea. So that does suggest that there's either going to be heavy fighting or heavy bombing of that area in the days to come.
And let's talk about the last 4 days. It's been 4 days since Iran attacked Israel with ballistic missiles, Liz, as you know. And the supreme leader in Iran led the main public prayers today. What does that signal, and what do you have to say?
Oh, well, he appeared with a rifle, so that gives you an idea of the tone of his address. He's over 80, but he was defiant. He also spent some time eulogizing Hassan Nasrallah, the late chief of Hezbollah. His death is a very serious blow to Iran and Iran's reputation. The organization he headed, Hezbollah, is Iran's most powerful proxy outside the country. And Iran knows and is trying to put a gloss on the fact that without him, Hezbollah has been seriously weakened, and therefore so has Iran. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said on the record that Iran had made a big mistake in attacking Israel and that it would pay. Well, today the supreme leader countered by saying Iran was prepared to conduct more strikes of its own if needed. That is, it was a warning of escalation.
All right, Liz Palmer for us this morning in Tel Aviv. Liz, thank you very much. Appreciate it. All right, the Dockworkers strike that threatened to cause severe damage to the U.S. economy, well, that has come to a temporary end. Workers celebrating after reaching a tentative agreement on wages. CBS News correspondent Nancy Chen joins us now to talk about this. Nancy, you were there reporting on the scene when the news broke. Describe that moment and what you learned about this deal.
Yeah, there was plenty of cheering, a lot of jubilation as that announcement came down. At least 25,000 dock workers at 14 ports along the eastern Gulf Coast, they can now return to work. In a joint statement, the Dock Workers Union and their employer group, they said a tentative agreement had been made on wages and that they would extend their current contract until January 15th. Those briefed on the deal said that includes a 62% raise, which is an increase from their previous offer of nearly 50%. But all other remaining issues will be addressed when the two reconvene with that January 15th deadline. And Vlad, that does include protections against automation and semi-automation, which was a major sticking point in all this. As you had mentioned, there have been also major concerns about supply chain issues because of this strike. One estimate had put the economic impact at as much as $4.5 billion a day. However, everyone back to work this morning. President Biden applauded both sides and released a statement saying collective bargaining works, Vlad. And just a PSA for all the folks who were stockpiling, which they shouldn't have done to begin with. You do not need to stockpile, especially the toilet paper, which, by the way, also more than 90% of the toilet paper used in this country comes from this country. And so all these people were buying up all the toilet paper for no reason at all.
It's a good point to make. I saw some reports that people were stockpiling toilet paper. I'm like, hello, we make that stuff here. One of the few things that we still make in America. We make great TP.
And, there's plenty that's made in the United States, but toilet paper, definitely we're okay on.
Yeah, we're good. Phew. Nancy Chen, have a great weekend. Thank you very much. All right, a serious subject now. This guy, Trump aide, Corey Lewandowski. He was ousted from the former president's inner circle after a woman accused him of assaulting and stalking her back in 2021. Well, guess what? Back in August, former President Trump rehired Lewandowski to help with his presidential campaign. In a CBS News exclusive, Lewandowski's accuser sat down with our Nikki Batiste, and she joins us now to talk about this. Nikki, good morning. Good to see you. Walk us through what this accuser has told you.
Vlad, good morning. So Trishelle Odom told me that back in September of 2021, she was then married to a Trump donor. She had been invited to a charity dinner in a Las Vegas hotel without her family. She was seated next to Corey Lewandowski. She said she didn't really even know who he was at the time. She was fairly new to the political scene. She said he very quickly made her uncomfortable, making sexual innuendos. He started touching her leg, pulling back her dress. Again, this is her story to me, telling her how large his private areas were and how long he could last in bed. Eventually, she said she did get up from the table. She tried to ask for help, found her way out of the party, but that Lewandowski followed her through the hotel. So she told me, I said, why didn't you just leave? And she said, well, I did, but he followed me. And she said she just tried to stay into a crowd until she could safely get to her hotel room. She did go to police eventually. The Las Vegas police ultimately charged Lewandowski with misdemeanor battery. He cut a deal to have the charges dismissed, but he did have to pay a fine and was required to apologize to Odom. After the incident, Trishelle Odom told us that she was offered money to not say anything from Lewandowski's lawyers, but she declined that offer. She said she also had a phone call from Donald Trump himself saying he's going to be off this campaign, explaining that Corey Lewandowski was drunk that night. He was removed at that time. Fast forward, whenever Corey Lewandowski was added back onto Trump's campaign just this August, she was upset. Trishelle didn't receive a phone call, and she felt that it was time to talk. She said she told me she wanted to share her story now to try to protect other women. I should note we reached out to the Trump campaign. They did not get back to us. We also reached out to Corey Lewandowski and his lawyers. He declined to do an interview. They didn't specifically address these allegations when we asked, but just noted that this particular case had been dismissed. And Trishelle Odom, again, said she's speaking now. She wants to help protect women. She's not involved in politics anymore. She has since divorced, and she felt that this was the right time to do so. Vlad?
Yeah, Nikki, I just wanted you to hit that a little bit more for people who are wondering why Trishelle decided to bring this to the public light again. And it's the last point that you made, right? Clearly, the allegations here are very, very serious, and I think she's just trying to shine a light on who this man is, because there are perhaps other women who might find themselves in similar circumstances.
That is what she felt. She felt that she said it alarmed her that Corey Lewandowski has back this level of power. I will note there have been at least two other public incidences involving Corey Lewandowski. One of them, quite famously on CCTV video, him grabbing a reporter's arm. So Trishelle told us that, again, she just worried for other women. Her own opinion about Corey Lewandowski's behavior is that she was fearful he might perhaps do this again. And she felt like it was her duty, really, to speak out.
All right, Nikki Batiste for us. As always, Nikki, excellent reporting. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, let's turn to weather now and bring in CBS News Philadelphia meteorologist Grant Gilmore with the first look at the national forecast. Grant.
Hey, what's up, Vlad? I know you like the heat, so that's where we're going to start. Look at all of these potential triple-digit record high temperatures that are going to be set today across Southern California into portions of Nevada, Arizona, Palm Springs, one of the hottest temperatures I could find, 109 degrees, ties today's record high temperature. Phoenix 108, Tucson 105, Vegas at 104, Fresno, California getting close to that record high temperature of 102 degrees. So you've got scorching conditions across the West. Meanwhile, still very warm with near record high temperatures in places like Grand Junction, Colorado. The heat extends all the way east into portions of Texas, Dallas at 91 degrees. Meanwhile, watching some tropical moisture across the Gulf states. This is with a potential tropical system. We'll track that and also keeping an eye on Major Hurricane Kirk in the Atlantic. Vlad, we'll get to that here in just a little while. For now, back over to you.
All right, Grant. Thanks, man. We'll check in with you a bit later. Appreciate it. Familiar face will hit the campaign trail alongside Vice President Harris. What we're learning about former President Barack Obama's upcoming appearance. You're streaming CBS News 24/7. Longtime Republican and vocal Trump critic, that would be former Congresswoman Liz Cheney, joined Vice President Kamala Harris at a rally yesterday where she argued Trump is unfit for office. Take a listen.
This year, I am proudly casting my vote for Vice President Kamala Harris. There is not an ounce of compassion in Donald Trump. He is petty, he is vindictive, and he is cruel. And Donald Trump is not fit to lead this good and great nation.
CBS News campaign reporter Aaron Navarro is following the Harris campaign for us, and he joins me now. Aaron, explain what the campaign is hoping Liz Cheney will bring to this ticket.
For those hardcore Trump supporters who maybe have a problem with Liz Cheney over her comments made about Trump in the last 3 years, this won't necessarily flip them to support Harris. But it's those conservative-leaning, moderate, independent voters that maybe like what Trump did in terms of the economy or his stances on immigration, but have a problem with his conduct on January 6th. Cheney being in the picture for Harris gives them a permission structure to take a closer look at Vice President Harris. And that's why you saw both of them really lean into that topic of January 6th, of democracy, and arguing that Trump, if he loses this election, will repeat some of the same conduct after this November. So it's really tapping into those independent voters and more Republican-leaning moderate ones.
So we've also learned that former President Barack Obama is going to hit the campaign trail with the vice president. What do we know about this? Where is he expected to go? And as you know, Aaron, the Democratic Party, I mean, Barack Obama remains the rock star, the star of the Democratic Party. But again, it goes to your question, right? I mean, and to the point that you made about Liz Cheney. If you are a dyed-in-the-wool Democrat, yeah, you love seeing Barack Obama at a rally, but what does he do for those independents? I mean, how does that play?
I'll start with what he's doing. He's starting next Thursday with a rally in Pittsburgh, a crucial part of the state, western Pennsylvania, where we haven't seen a bunch of big rallies from Harris. The vice president herself is expected to be in Nevada that day, so she won't necessarily appear with Obama as of now, but he's expected to hit up many battleground states in this last month before the election. And what Obama's presence does on the campaign trail is, one, rev up the base. In this kind of snap election, Harris coming in late July, they've had to do two things, which is make sure that their base is still engaged and turns out at a big level, as well as try and make a play to those moderate Republican voters, and that's why they're using Cheney. Obama being in the picture may sway some moderate independent voters, but I see it as more of a base motivator for the Harris campaign.
All right, Aaron Navarro for us in Wisconsin. Big, important state there, Aaron. Thank you very much, friend. All right. Meanwhile, former President Trump held his own rally in Michigan yesterday where he spread another baseless conspiracy theory about hurricane relief funds. Listen to this.
They stole the FEMA money just like they stole it from a bank so they could give it to their illegal immigrants that they want to have vote for them this season.
CBS News campaign reporter Libby Cathy is joining us now with more on this. All right, Libby. The lie that the former president just delivered on that stage at that rally yesterday. Explain where that conspiracy theory came from and why is he saying it if it's not true?
Yeah, good morning, Vlad. A couple mistruths in that clip we just heard from the former president. One, non-citizens cannot vote in U.S. elections. Secondly, money is not being stolen from FEMA. And actually, the agency has had to put up a website called Rumor Response Hurricane Helene to combat some of this misinformation that is circulating while first responders are on the ground trying to recover from this hurricane. So Trump yesterday, you heard that clip saying that money is being stolen from FEMA, from migrants. Where we think this originates is there is another program under Homeland Security, just like FEMA is, and it is called the Shelter and Services Program that provides funds and to support to non-citizens awaiting their court proceedings. But this is totally separate from FEMA. FEMA has said they have enough money for Hurricane Helene recovery, and that's why they put up this website to try to get at this misinformation. And it's not the first mistruth we've heard from the former president on Hurricane Helene response in particular. He also has repeated the claim that red areas, that Trump areas, are not getting the same support that blue areas are. There is no evidence to support that claim, Vlad, as FEMA is trying to, on the ground, combat this misinformation in real time.
And you're doing it as well with your incredible reporting, Libby. Thank you very much for that. Let's talk about billionaire Elon Musk, who's saying now that he's going to be in attendance for the former president's rally in Butler, Pennsylvania tomorrow. We also know that the family of the man who died in that assassination attempt, Corey Contemporary, his family will be there. I probably didn't say his name properly, but I want to be respectful of that. What do you know?
Yes, so we just got a list from the former president's campaign with a whole list of special guests that will be at this rally tomorrow in Butler, Pennsylvania. Corey Contemporary, that firefighter who was shot and killed at that event. Yes, his widow will be there, and his daughter will be there, along with Dr. Jim Sweetland. That was one of the doctors who tried to save Corey's life in the aftermath. Our own Jake Rosen interviewed him on the scene. He will also be returning as a special guest. And Elon Musk, as you say it, Trump and Elon have had a close relationship, especially in recent weeks. Trump brings him up at rallies several times, and he said on Twitter that he will be there. One name missing on that list, Melania Trump. Did not see her, but we will see if she's in Butler tomorrow. Vlad.
Yeah, I did see, Libby, that the former president was asked about I guess the video that was released by Melania Trump in anticipation of the book that she's coming out with, or that she's probably already out with, where she seems to take a different tone from the former president, and more importantly, that evangelical base of support that has applauded the former president's move to reverse Roe versus Wade. What did she say?
Yes, so in her new book, Melania, we have a clip from it. She says that she thinks that abortion is a fundamental freedom, and she says that she's believed this for most of her adult life. Obviously, this goes against the former president who appointed those 3 justices who overturned Roe v. Wade. But asked about this by News Nation yesterday, Trump said he told Melania that she should write whatever her heart believes and that it is her story to tell. Vlad.
All right, Libby Cathy reporting for us from Raleigh, North Carolina this morning. Thank you, Libby. A mixed verdict was reached in the death of Tyree Nichols, while the family says they're comfortable with the verdict despite the former officer's acquittal on some charges. Stay with us. You're streaming CBS News 24/7. Welcome back to CBS News 24/7. Here's a look at some of the top stories we're following for you this morning. A new lawsuit in a Los Angeles court accuses country music star Garth Brooks of rape and assault. An unnamed woman who says she worked as a hair and makeup stylist for Brooks claims he raped and sexually assaulted her in a Los Angeles hotel room back in 2019 during a work trip. She also claims he subjected her to repeated unwanted sexual advances for about 2 years. Brooke denies all the allegations and says he went to court to stop her from filing the lawsuit. In California, 2 farm workers have been infected with bird flu, marking the 15th and 16th human cases of the virus detected this year in the U.S. The dairy workers had contact with infected cattle in the Central Valley. They developed conjunctivitis and had mild symptoms. The 2 worked at different farms, and health officials say the cases are not linked. 3 wildlife guides in Wyoming are facing possible prison time and up to $250,000 in fines after they allegedly ran an illegal hunting enterprise that resulted in the deaths of at least a dozen mountain lions. The indictment says the 3 guides violated a federal act banning illegal trafficking of wildlife. They're also accused of falsifying portions of their big game mortality report, which the state of Idaho requires them to submit. Trial in the case is set to begin on November 18th. A jury delivered a mixed verdict for the 3 police officers in the fatal beating of Tyree Nichols. They are now former police officers. All of them were convicted of witness tampering related to the cover-up, but the defendants were also acquitted of violating Nichols' civil rights by causing his death. CBS News correspondent Elise Preston joins us now from Memphis, Tennessee, to talk about this. Elise, good to see you. Walk us through what happened in the courtroom and what comes next.
Well, Vlad, after weeks of testimony, it took jurors about 6 hours to deliver that mixed verdict that you talked about, where they found the officers guilty of trying to cover up what happened the night Nichols was beaten, but not guilty of violating his civil rights. Now, those 3 officers were immediately taken into custody, and they have a detention hearing on Monday to find out where they will be until sentencing, which is in January of next year. Now, we can also tell you that charge, that conviction of obstruction, comes with up to 20 years in prison. And because it is the federal system, there's no chance of parole. So they will remain in prison for the length of whatever their sentence is. Now, keep in mind, there were 2 other officers who pleaded guilty in these crimes. They also need to be sentenced. Just after that verdict was read, the family gathered right outside the courthouse. There were supporters who chanted justice for Tyree. And his family said despite the mixed verdict, they were very pleased because all 5 officers who were involved in that brutal attack nearly 20 months ago, they've all been held accountable. What's next, you ask? This was just one milestone in a very lengthy process. It took a long time to get here, but there's still a state trial. There's still a civil case where the family is suing the city and Memphis police. And then there's also the DOJ is investigating the Memphis Police Department with a pattern or practices investigation to see how this happened and is this something that could happen again.
All right, Elise Preston reporting for us. Thank you, Elise. Appreciate it. Okay, states ravaged by Hurricane Helene will spend the next few months, even years, recovering. The ripple effects are already hitting American wallets as victims wait for basic needs from the federal government. Oxford economics chief and U.S. economist Ryan Sweet has an outlook on just how bad it could actually get. Ryan, thanks so much for joining us. Explain how are the impacts of Helene expected to hit the U.S. economy as a whole and what it might do for just individuals.
So overall, as a whole, it will have a small negative impact on the economy. Particularly it's going to show up in the jobs number that we'll get in October. So overall, non-farm employment in the U.S., maybe 50,000, 60,000 lighter because of the hurricane than if the storm didn't occur. But we've got to keep in mind, $27, $28 trillion economy. It takes a lot to move the needle on that, and this hurricane is unlikely to do that on a macroeconomic scale. But unfortunately, the regional economies, these families that have been hurt and negatively affected by this storm, it's devastating to them.
Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas says FEMA will not have enough money to make it through the season. What does that spending look like for FEMA after a natural disaster, one that's sort of unprecedented like this one?
Yeah, we can look back at past hurricanes that have been quite significant. Hurricane Katrina, you have Superstorm Sandy. A lot of federal government spending occurs in the first year, to help with rebuilding, cleanup, provide aid to those households that have been impacted by these storms. So a lot of federal money will flow into the area. Insurance money will flow in as well. And typically, that combination, government's funding, insurance payouts, make those regional economies financially whole. But this is a long process towards a road to recovery. Now, the hurricane season isn't over in the U.S. It goes, typically until the end of November. So if we get any additional hurricanes, FEMA is going to likely have to ask lawmakers to pass a supplemental disaster bill, which is a no-brainer.
Many businesses were stalled during the hurricane on top of the port strike. Did Helene impact imports at all?
The jury's still out. I think it, temporarily may have caused some delays, some backlogs in imports. We don't have the concrete data to show what the backlog was. And then, as you pointed out, the port strike that affected ports in the Northeast and along the Gulf Coast, and even though that only lasted roughly a week, that's going to muddle the picture and try to separate what the impact of the hurricane was versus the port.
All right, Professor, thank you so much. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Turning abroad now, as the Middle East waits to see how Israel will respond to Tuesday's massive missile attack by Iran, oil prices have risen over the prospect of possible Israeli strikes on Iranian oil facilities. That is something President Biden says his administration is discussing. So for more on this, I want to bring in CBS News foreign correspondent Ramy Inocencio. Ramy, break it down for us. What's going on with oil right now?
Hey, Vlad. Yeah, good to see you. Well, it's been a wild ride this week. Put it to you one way. If you were invested in oil, you'd be 9 to 10% richer right now compared to the start of this week. But that is, of course, because of war and fear that might expand across the Mideast. And we've got a chart we want to bring up for you showing you the price of Brent crude oil over the past year. And if you take a look at it, look to the right-hand side of the screen there, and you see that line shooting up there. Since Tuesday, when Iran targeted Israel with those 200 missiles or so, it's jumped by about 10%, but about half of that was because of President Biden and his very off-the-cuff remarks saying the U.S. is talking with Israel about hitting Iran's oil facilities. What he perhaps didn't think, Vlad, though, in that little moment was how he might impact oil markets. It has been climbing again today, higher than 1% earlier today, but it's come off of those highs right now. We're looking, though, at the highest weekly jump in 2 years after Russia invaded Ukraine. And just to put this into context, Iran, it's the third biggest producer of oil in OPEC, pumps more than 3 million barrels of oil each day, and Citigroup estimates that a strike could take out more than a third of all the oil that it produces.
As you know, Ramy, higher energy prices are a concern all the time, especially as we head into the winter months. And then there's this U.S. election. What are some of the political implications that higher energy prices might mean?
Yeah, of course, Americans don't like higher energy prices, gas prices, oil prices, and most of OPEC's oil reserves, we know, are in the Mideast, which is also, as we know, one of the most volatile regions on this planet. So if higher energy prices do hit where you are, hit the U.S. as we close in on that election, that would almost certainly support former President Trump's attack line. We know he's been pushing that high inflation line under Biden-Harris, and it could hurt Vice President Kamala Harris's chances. I looked back, and there's a study a couple months ago about gas prices similar to this. S&P Global did this over the summer. It showed that for every 10-cent rise in gas prices, that correlated with a 0.6% fall in presidential approval numbers during election years, and that dates back all the way to 1976. And we know that Trump and Harris are fighting for razor-thin margins. Our own CBS News polling puts that at around 1% or less in several states. So the price of energy could very well be the difference in terms of making people turn out, making people vote for Harris or for Trump.
Very telling data point, Ramy. As always, my friend, thank you very much. Have a nice weekend.
You bet. Take care.
All right, the Menendez brothers have spent nearly 35 years in prison for the murder of their parents. Coming up, we're going to tell you why a possible resentencing or a trial may be on the way. You're streaming CBS News 24/7. Welcome back to CBS News 24/7. Let's send it over to CBS News Philadelphia meteorologist Grant Gilmore with another look at the national forecast. Grant.
Good morning, Vlad. Let's start with the tropics, where still very active, even though we're not seeing any direct impacts here on the United States yet. Let's pull up the globe here and let's take a look at what we're tracking here, because there's actually a couple of things out in the middle of the Atlantic that we're keeping a close eye on. In fact, this is a really cool satellite view showing the sun rising over the western hemisphere there. You see out over the central Atlantic, a couple of things spinning out there, one of which is Major Hurricane Kirk there. That is right there. And then you have Tropical Storm Leslie just to the south and east of that. Both of those will remain over the Atlantic, but even Leslie forecast to become a hurricane as we go through the weekend. Speaking of hurricane, let me show you this behind me. This is Hurricane Kirk. Hurricane Kirk actually just weakening. The National Hurricane Center coming out with the 11 o'clock advisory a little bit earlier, but wind speeds are still at an impressive 140 miles per hour. This system, if you look closely, you can see the eye, or that center of the storm. That eye is beginning to contract and come and kind of collapse on itself a little bit. So that's why we're seeing some of the weakening with it, but still a significant hurricane, though it's not that big. It's actually about 100 miles, even 150 miles smaller than Hurricane Helene as it made its approach on the United States a couple of weeks ago. All right, let's talk about the Gulf of Mexico right now. Also watching an area of low pressure that may develop over the next 7 days. Even if this doesn't develop into a classic tropical system, it's still going to bring quite a bit of rain, especially to portions of Florida. Places like Cape Coral, Florida, down to Key West, and even Miami could see anywhere between 3, even upwards of 6 inches of rain into early next week. So that is a concern for some flooding. Meanwhile, the other end of the spectrum, we got some big heat, still record temperatures across the desert Southwest into most of California, where 31 million people are underneath either excessive heat warnings or heat advisories. Look at some of these forecast highs today. Places like Phoenix up around 109 degrees, 108 in Palm Springs. This heat continues. In fact, it spreads a little bit to the north up into Grand Junction, Colorado. These high temperatures are 10 to 20 degrees warmer than normal. But just look at all of those triple-digit temperatures all the way through the weekend. Meanwhile, very warm conditions across the southern plains, and then again, watching for those rainy and potential flooding conditions across the Gulf Coast as we watch that potential tropical development. Vlad, back to you.
All right, Grant. Thanks, dude. We'll talk to you later. As Election Day gets closer, a top Justice Department official is warning China, Russia, and Iran pose a real threat to American democracy. Matthew Olson, head of the department's National Security Division, sat down with CBS Evening News anchor and managing editor Norah O'Donnell. Listen.
What is your biggest concern?
Really an onslaught of foreign election interference. So we're seeing Russia, Iran, and China targeting our elections. They see this as a period of vulnerability for us.
Iran, Russia, and China are trying to strike at the heart of democracy.
I think that's a very fair statement. This is a clear and present danger.
How would I know that's happening?
Right, you may not see it. We're seeing sophisticated efforts by our adversaries to hide their steps.
Well, although former President Donald Trump has long claimed that Russian interference is a hoax, Olson says that is simply not true. Now to an update on one of the most talked about murder cases of the 1990s. Eric and Lyle Menendez were convicted of the 1989 murder of their parents at their Los Angeles home. They've been behind bars for 34 years, but new evidence is leading LA's district attorney to take another look. CBS News correspondent Natalie Morales has the story.
Yesterday, the Los Angeles County District Attorney George Gascon revealed that the emergence of new evidence in the case of Eric and Lyle Menendez could lead to a resentencing.
We have been given a photocopy of a letter that allegedly was sent by one of the brothers to another family member talking about him being the victim of molestation.
In 1989, the Menendez brothers made headlines for the murder of their parents, Jose and Kitty. Their trial was must-watch TV at the time. They were convicted in 1996 and have been serving life sentences ever since. The brothers, now 53 and 56, have never denied killing their parents, but say they were repeatedly sexually abused by them and committed the crime because they feared for their lives. Late last year, I spoke to Lyle Menendez about the new evidence in their case.
What did you think when you heard about these new claims and evidence?
I mean, for me, I just was happy. Just a burden to be telling what happened to and just have so much doubt in the public air.
If the judge finds this evidence credible, I think it is sufficient to give them a new trial.
Cliff Gardner is an appellate lawyer for the brothers. He says the new evidence includes a letter that was recently found in storage that Eric reportedly wrote to his cousin 8 months before the murders.
Every night I stay up thinking he might come in. I'm afraid. He's crazy. He's warned me 100 times about telling anyone, especially Lyle. No one knew about it at trial. It was never presented.
Another attorney for the brothers, Mark Garagos, also spoke, saying the reviewing of the new evidence is long overdue.
We've got a much more robust and evolved understanding of abuse. I think it's time. Their family thinks it's time.
Natalie Morales had extensive reporting on the Menendez brothers that aired on the most recent episode of 48 Hours. You can watch that episode tomorrow and stream our catalog of episodes on Paramount+. Speaking of 48 hours, I got to give a big shout out to my dear friend and co-anchor of almost 9 years on CBS News 24/7, Anne-Marie Green. She signed off from the stream, the 4 a.m. show that she did every day for many years, a 7 a.m. show that she was also anchoring, and of course our 9 a.m. show. She is now joining the team at 48 Hours, which is of course the best true crime show on the air. We are so proud of her and wish her well. Folks, by the way, Anne-Marie is an incredible journalist, but does this woman love crime and crime stories? I mean, she's going to fit in right at home with the 48 Hours team. So be sure to catch her on Saturdays on CBS, also streaming on Paramount Plus. And you can also listen to the 48 Hours Postmortem podcast. Anne-Marie, we love you. Congratulations on your new role. Mwah. All right, let's talk about some football. Wild night of football between the Falcons and the Bucs kicked off Week 5 of the NFL season. We're going to recap the thrilling overtime game next. You're streaming CBS News 24/7. The Atlanta Falcons beat the Tampa Bay Buccaneers 36-30 in overtime in a thrilling Thursday night football matchup. Falcons quarterback Kirk Cousins, folks, threw for over 500 yards and 4 touchdowns. He's won 4 of the last 5 games. He's played on Thursday night. Falcons wide receiver Drake London had 12 catches for 154 yards and a touchdown. The win gives the Falcons an early division lead in the NFC South. Let's bring in CBS News Philadelphia meteorologist Grant Gilmore with the last look at the national forecast. Grant, 500 yards, only 22 quarterbacks, I think, in the entire history of the NFL have thrown for 500-plus yards.
That's impressive, man. It really is, you know. And look, I mean, it's early in the season, too, so I mean, we've got a lot more excitement as we go through the rest of the season for sure. So, look, I mean, just keep it coming. I love this kind of stuff, especially on a Thursday night. You got some excitement behind you there, too. The fun. Yeah, we do, right? I mean, a lot to track here, Vlad, so I'll try to keep it brief. We are looking at, heavy rainfall across the Gulf of Mexico. That could bring flooding concerns to central and southern Florida through the weekend to early next week. Meanwhile, record heat out west. We're talking triple-digit record high temperatures from Southern California out towards Phoenix. Even places like Grand Junction, Colorado are getting into the record game later this afternoon. Rain, maybe some snow to the Pacific Northwest, and then pleasant conditions, at least briefly, for today with more nice weather on the way to the Northeast this weekend. Vlad, back to you. Have a good weekend, man.
All right, Grant. Thanks, brother. Talk to you on Monday. Have a nice weekend. New research shows the average person spends 3.5 hours on their smartphone every day. Wait a second. Let's see if that's true. 16 hours. Wait, what? No. But there's a new movement trying to get people to disconnect in order to reconnect. Our Tina Krause has more.
It's a digital distraction few can ignore. So you have to answer it.
Yes, I do. Yes, I do.
Especially with social media where you literally just get roped in, you can't put it away.
Seeing so many phones in so many hands got British friends Ben Housel and Jacob Curtis talking about turning the tide.
We just want a group of people to put their phones away for an hour and engage in genuine, authentic conversation.
The pair launched the Unplug Club.
We've got some chess, we've got trivia.
Where admission comes with one rule: surrender your phone at the door.
We want to bring back offline activities. These activities that you did before phones were a thing. Drawing, painting.
Their first event at a cafe in southern England sold out. Tables filled with friends and strangers opting for a tech timeout.
And I think it's a great thing to get people to open up and connect with each other.
We all rely on our phones so much, it's just quite nice to be without them for an hour or two.
A month later, phone-free fellowship is flourishing with more screenless social gatherings on offer.
So here we are, 36 phones in a box. We both think that the world would be a better place if we weren't so addicted, we weren't doom scrolling for 2 hours every night before we go to bed.
They hope to welcome more converts to the Unplug Club, where the only distraction may be your next move. Tina Krause, CBS News, London.
So my daily average is 6 hours, 9 minutes, but that's a 13% reduction from last week. So I might need to join this club. Although, wouldn't want to be a member of any club that would have me as a member. An encore of CBS Mornings is coming up next.